All right, let's go over our essential question. How can sports influence individuals and societies? Our today's focusing question is going to be, how can people challenge or overcome barriers through sport? All right, so today's lesson is lesson 23. So we are going to closely read the excerpt from About the Paralympics, and we're going to read the excerpt from the history in detail. So the materials we would need is our assessment 23A focusing question task, as well as our 23A handout for research topics for focusing question tasks, and then 23B. Today we will probably only get to 23A assessment and handout 23A. So our learning goals, we are learning how to navigate several informational texts about Ludwig Guttmann and the Paralympics to answer questions about the topics. And we're also going to learn how to integrate information from several sources about Ludwig Guttmann and the Paralympics to reflect on the impact and significance of Guttmann's work. All right, so today's definitions are going to be baffled and zeal. So before we get started, let's go ahead and look at the article about the Paralympics. So we're going to look at this first paragraph here. Can I have a volunteer to read this paragraph? 1948.
And we're stop at Pole.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. July 28, 1948. The first Olympic Games after World War II opened in London. On the same day, 35 miles in runway of London, a very different competition opened. The Stoke Mandeville Games for the Paralyzed, held on grounds of a hospital that treated injured war veterans, featured 16 people, 14 men and 2 women, competing in one sport, archery or whatever. The games were the brainchild of Dr. Ludwig Guttmann, head of the Stoke Mandeville Hospital Spinal Injuries Unit. Guttmann had realized that enforced and immobile bed rest, the standard practice in spinal injury cases, was hurting his patients. He experienced with moving the patients, gently turning them over regularly, and encouraged by the results. He began programs to strengthen the patients with simple games of ball, then wheelchair polo and basketball, darts, and archery. Patients lived and thrived, and the idea of competitive sports for people with physical disabilities took hold.
What can we annotate just by looking at this passage? So remember, when we annotate, what are we annotating?
Important things.
Important details. So what are some important details that we can underline from here? And remember, if you don't know, you can always refer back to our notes in the knowledge section in our binder. So if everybody can do me a favor, everybody open up your binder to the knowledge section so that we can properly annotate this paragraph. So let me just read this part right here where it says, the games were the brainchild of Dr. Ludwig Guttmann, head of Stoke Mandeville Hospital's Spinal Injury Unit. So Guttmann had realized that enforced immobile bed rest, the standard practice in spinal injury cases, was hurting his patients. So he experimented with moving the patients and gently turning them over regularly, and was encouraged by the results. He began programs to strengthen the patients with simple games of ball, then wheelchair polo, basketball, darts, and archery. So just based upon what I just read, what can we annotate? Mayor, what can we annotate?
That what's going on
Yep, so we can say Gutman had realized that in forced and mobile bed rests, the standard practice in spinal injury cases was hurting his patients. So he would move the patients gently, turning them over regularly, and was encouraged by the results. So once he began providing programs to strengthen their patients, how did the patients feel when this was happening?
They were gaining confidence.
Yep, they were gaining confidence. Also, it says patients lived and thrived in the idea of competitive sports for people with physical disabilities took hold. So which means that the patients had what? They gained confidence, exactly. So do you see the comparison to what we wrote yesterday to what's in this first paragraph? Because what we wrote in our notes in the knowledge section was the introduction of Gutman, correct? And how it all started. So it began with what sport? Which sport did he begin with?
He began with
archery. So competing in one sport, archery. And what was it called before it was called the Paralympics? What was the game called?
Stoke Mandeville Games for the Paralyzed.
Yep, it was the Stoke Mandeville Games for the Paralyzed. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and move forward by looking at the next paragraph. So I'm gonna go ahead and read this part. So it says, 2 years later, the Stoke Mandeville competition had expanded to 60 competitors and javelin throwing was included. By 1954, 14 nations were represented at State Mandeville with athletes from as far away as Australia. So then it went to Egypt, Pakistan, and Portugal, and in 1960, 400 athletes with disabilities from 23 countries gathered at the Olympic Stadium in Rome. Just days after the Olympics had concluded, they competed in archery, basketball, swimming, fencing, javelin, shot put, club throwing, snooker, swimming, table tennis, and the pentathlon.
Isn't that like a type of race?
The pentathlon?
Yes.
I'm not sure. We'll have to research that. Decade, Paralympic competition was only held for summer sports. Then in 1976, in Sweden, the first Winter Games were held. The first games also to feature athletes who were not wheelchair users. So there were 198 athletes from 16 countries competed in alpine and Nordic skiing for amputees and visually impaired athletes, which also included ice sledge racing, which was a demonstration sport. So just to elaborate what I just read, this is going over what takes place within the Olympics in general. So when we watch the Olympics on TV, what sports do we see? Myra?
Track.
We see track.
Like something like spear throwing, something like that.
Yeah, so that's called the, which one is it called? It starts with a J.
Javelin.
Javelin.
It's not my first.
Harrison, what's another sport that you see on TV?
Basketball.
Okay, basketball can be an Olympic, yeah. Let's see here. Edmundo, what's the sport that's in the Olympics? Huh? Is soccer in the Olympics?
I don't know. I don't watch the Olympics. I do watch the Olympics.
What's another one? Just look at the board, Edmundo. Use your resources. Okay, snooker. Oh, that's the, it's not the long jump, it's the, I know what you're talking about. I believe it's the high jump, I believe. Yep, tennis. So this is just an introduction to all the types of sports that take place in the Olympics. So when we read this paragraph, what did we learn? That many athletes came from where? Yep. So they came from different countries, right? So different countries came together to join within the Olympic Stadium in Rome. So, in comparison, we found out that more than a decade, the Paralympic competition was only held when? When was it only held? In the summertime. Was it held in the fall time? No, it was held in the summertime. Athletes were, or what type of athletes participated in the Paralympics? There were two kinds that were mentioned. There was two of them that were mentioned.
Athletes who are not wheelchair users. Wait, no, never mind.
So look right here. So look at the last sentence in this paragraph. To help you.
Amputees and
Yep.
impaired athletes.
Yep, so the amputees and the visually impaired athletes. All right, good job, everybody. So let's move forward. So let's go to the next paragraph. It's the modern Paralympics. So it says the first summer games of the modern Paralympics era were held in Seoul, South Korea in 1988. 100,000 attended the opening ceremonies with featured skydivers, thousands of children, and 700 wheelchair dancers. So over 950 world records were set, with Tricia Zong of the U.S. winning 12 gold medals in swimming and setting 9 world records. The first Winter Games to take place in Olympic venues were held in 1992 in the Tignes and Albertville, France. Since then, both Winter and Summer Paralympic Games had taken place exactly 2 weeks after the Olympic Games, in the same arenas and on the same tracks and slopes. So, what does this paragraph go over? Oh, so what does this paragraph go over? Yes. So the first summer games of the modern Paralympic era. So this is going over the modern Paralympics that took place in 1988. So if there was a test on this and it was asking you what was this passage about, what would you say?
Paralympic, or like the summer games for the modern Paralympic era.
So if it was asking you, what is this paragraph about, or what is it mentioning, or what is the main idea of this paragraph, you would say it goes over the first summer games of the modern Paralympic era, which was held in 1988. All right. All right, let's continue reading. Sparks of fire. All right, we have 2 more paragraphs and then we will be finished with this text. So the spark of fire, Stephen Hawking, the renowned physicist with disabilities due to ALS, spoke at the opening ceremonies of the 1992 Barcelona Games. Each one has within us the spark of the fire, a creative touch. An archer lifted a flaming arrow over the Paralympic cauldron, igniting the Paralympic torch for the Summer Games. In Lillehammer, Sweden, 1994, ice sled hockey debuted as Paralympic sport. The home team, Sweden, takes gold. In 1998, the first Winter Games held outside of Europe took place in Nagano, Japan. Almost 600 athletes competed in 4 sports. So that included alpine skiing, Nordic skiing, cross country, and biathlon, the ice sled racing, and sled hockey. In Sydney, Australia, 2000, 3,800 athletes in 122 countries. For the first time, Paralympic athletes stayed in the Olympic Village. So Team USA took gold for the first time in sled hockey in the Salt Lake City Games, 2002. Yes, yes, go ahead. And the medal counts, taking 43 medals. So if we look back to the spark of fire, they invited a man called Stephen Hawking, who was a physicist with disabilities due to ALS. So he actually spoke at the opening ceremonies of the 1992 Barcelona Games. So what did he quote from, what was one of his quotes when he spoke for the game? And just read from right here. Barcelona game. Yeah, I would say Barcelona. Within. Creative touch. So when he quoted, each one has within us the spark of fire, a creative touch. So keep in mind, when someone asks for a quote, it's going to have this punctuation right here, which is called a quotation mark. So this is considered a quote right here. All right, let's keep moving on to the last passage. All right, this says Top Gear. As adaptive sports grew, they attracted remarkable technical innovations. Early sport competitions featured wheelchair weighing 50 pounds and more. Athletes would chop off pieces to streamline the chairs for competition. Today's chairs weigh 15 pounds and offer the athletes amazing opportunities for speed and maneuverability. Other adaptive sports equipment has also changed radically. Wood and steel has been replaced by titanium and graphite. Microchips are embedded for balance and stability, and prosthetics and computer fitted to the athlete's body. The results in summer sports are racing times that compete with able-bodied athletes. In 2012, for the first time, South African Paralympic Oscar Pistorius, running on carbon fiber prosthetics called cheetahs, and called the fastest man on no legs, competed in both the Olympics and the Paralympics. Alright, the winter equipment has also evolved rapidly. The first 6 skis were so heavy, athletes could take on moguls and steep slopes. Fiberglass and polyester have radically changed the weight of the skis and widened the athletes' opportunities. Shock absorbers in 6 skis also allow skiers to tackle tough terrain at high speeds. Outrigger skis, ski poles with small skis on the ends, help Paralympic skiers balance, turn, and control their speed and stop, and also help standing Paralympic skiers get on ski lifts. So, does everybody have their journals out?
Yep.
Alright, so go ahead and write our vocabulary. Word is baffled. And baffled is an adjective. And it means to be very confused or unable to understand something. All right, and then the last one is zeal. So zeal is a noun, and it means to have great energy, enthusiasm, or passion for something. All right, I'm gonna give you some time to write this vocabulary, and then we're gonna move forward with some questions. So, here's some questions. All right, y'all ready?
No.
All right, y'all get started.